being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. They can only hear us today, not see us, which is a blessing, I'm sure, to them. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. I know the roads are not easy in places, with everywhere seemingly having an accident or roadworks, but such is the way of living in Norwich, or on the edge of Norwich. This is the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting from the 23rd of January 2024. Do we have any declarations of interest? So that's being none. Apologies for absence and substitutes.
Yes, Chairman, we have apologies from Councillor Jones and his substitute is Councillor Berry.
Okay. Chairman's announcements, other than the fact that I did say I would speak, I know when there was a tied vote, and I would make the point at Cabinet regarding the fact that the concerns, although we disagreed at the last meeting on an issue, that I felt that you raised your concerns and objections in a fair and legitimate way, which had resonance with your group certainly, but probably with the other councillors in many ways. So I did raise that point and wanted that to be just acknowledged, that I, when I say I'll raise something, I will raise it. As I said, we have to disagree on some things, so that's going to happen sometimes, but I did raise it anyway. We have, I believe, Emma has looked into, we did mention the idea of the other room. Can I just ask, because we were looking at moving to the other room that was mentioned at the last meeting, has that been knocked on the head?
Yep, so in terms of, as you're all aware, we're trying different layouts in the conference centre. Magically, we tried another one this evening. So what we are doing is getting them all programmed tomorrow, and the layout for this room will be as it was when we walked in earlier today, because that's what's been agreed for council, planning and cabinet. And so ONS is the only other one that live streams. So we have options of using this room in the layout that you had before, or we can use the room next door in the boardroom layout, but we're not able to live stream from there. So it's just about what do we want to do from the perspective of ONS. We could have boardroom layout in here, audio live stream as we are this evening, but I wouldn't be able to do the picture. So there's options that I'm going to talk through with Councillor Starling as chair as to what we do going forward. So if anyone's got anything they want to feed back, just touch up with me at the end of the meeting, and I can take that on board as we move that forwards.
Thank you. The only other thing, oh no, something which I will raise when we actually get to one of the points. Do we have any public speaking?
There's no public speaking, Chairman.
Wonderful. Okay, we go on to item number 5, budget questions for Cabinet. I'll read out the points here. Request the committee consider the Cabinet responses to the budget questions and ask members if they had any further questions or comments, and after the debate summarise any recommendations which might have arisen from the discussion, and then Cabinet for their attendance at the meeting. So I will do that when we get to the end. But can I just remind members we are here to expand on the questions or ask for a deeper understanding of some of the issues? Can we avoid, if possible, trying to ask the same question that is already within there? I know there's a lot of questions, and to memorise all those questions and to double check, but hopefully if you've got something you wish to ask, if it's already been asked, just accept that it may already been answered, sorry. And so I'm just asking for brevity, I guess, where we don't need further repetition of things that have already been said. And at that point, I should show a bit more brevity and stop repetition of what I've said.
Yeah, excuse me, Chairman, but I just wondered, should there be some minutes from the last meeting? I think it was the 9th of January.
No, they'll be coming to the next meeting.
Okay, so we've seen the questions, and this is open to, this is your chance to ask any further questions. We've got Cabinet here, and we've got officers should we need further clarification. And if we need any further clarification from that, any questions which are need a more technical response, I'm sure that Cabinet and officers will respond and send a response to the person who's asked the question, but also share that with ONS as a whole, so we're all aware of any answers to any questions that we might want to know the answer to. So without me wanting to read through all these questions, which would seem pointless, has anybody got anything they would like to ask or say? Jonathan?
Yeah, just on question 9, obviously that is a financial question. The answer is that Cabinet will be considering an overreaching charging policy in January 24. Well, that did come to Cabinet, but the actual overreaching charging policy wasn't a financial paper. It was the process of the charging, not anything about finances. So I would say that obviously we've asked a financial question and we've been given an answer that says, oh, we're looking at that in January, but that wasn't actually looking at the charging, which would be the financial side of it. It was looking at a policy. So I think if we could just have when charges are going to change, because that will be what then affects the financial side of it.
Perhaps we could ask Cabinet Member to expand on how this works. I know the problem regarding bringing any charges in, that it's about how enforceable things are. And I know that has to be decided before anything comes in, but I'll leave someone over there who knows far more about it than me to answer. Who would like to take this one on? Sue?
Thank you. Yes, I hear what you're saying. We did bring through a policy. That's absolutely true. But part of that policy, really, and all the workings that are going on with that, is also to look at ways we might be promoting our charges for various things. Indeed, the pre-app planning charges will be coming forward very soon. The car parking charges are also under review. So where we can, we are looking at those charges and we will be bringing something forward. The one thing I will stress, though, is that, of course, we are not allowed, and we would not try to, make a profit from any of those charges. What we're actually trying to do is cover the costs. So we need to be clear, and of course I think you're probably all aware that the government has actually recently increased the amount by which you can charge for planning and some of the other things that you can do. So we will be taking those into account, and that might help us actually to make sure that we do charge the right fees for the services we provide, so without making a profit, but we actually cover those costs, which is appropriate, I think. In particular, I would stress, is because one of the things that I think we would all agree is that if you are having a service, then you are the person that really needs to be paying for it. It's not for everybody else in the district to be paying for a service that you are actually taking advantage of necessarily. So that is why we're looking at this in the whole, and they will be coming through a bit at a time as we work our way forward, and those sorts of things are also being taken into account as we prepare the budget. I hope that helps.
Has anybody else got anything else they'd like to ask? Yes, Martin.
I've got 3 questions. First one is on item 12 regarding the social prescribing. Now I know that when this came forward previously, in previous years, we'd looked at how the funding on this, and Kerry did a fantastic job on sorting this out, but we utilised the conf funding in funding the places, and then my recollection is that the contract is up for renewal very soon for this, and therefore also looking at where the budget for this is coming from and how we're going to take it forward. I know at the time as well there was a want to, because the geographical Broadland area doesn't cover the same as the NN1 and NN2 areas, but there was an aspiration to move into the NN1 and NN2. Also, I think there was the areas being covered were not by a different means, weren't effectively being utilised. So there was what we were going to do around that. Item 7 about the BVR. Absolutely.
We'll come back to, I think, so we don't overload and then lose the point of the first one. We'll take them each. We'll take your 3. I'll come back to you. Yeah. Who would like to take that on? It's quite a technical question anyways, but yeah, thank you, Natasha.
You hear me? Yeah, thank you, Chair. Perfectly reasonable question, and yeah, we are well aware of the funding situation. There has been, I don't know if the meeting has happened yet this week, but there is one planned for this week regarding the contracts, the funding, and all of that. And as you said, the NHS boundaries don't line up with the local authority boundaries. That is a problem, but that is one of the things that will be discussed at the meeting. We do not want to be in a situation where there is a postcode lottery of who is able to receive which services. We very much value the social prescribing services, and we will do whatever we can to make sure this is continued, but it is part of a wider discussion that I can't go into public detail with right now because those discussions haven't finished, but it is something we are aware of, and I'm awaiting an update from Mike very, very soon. Thank you.
The next item was item 7 on the BVR and the bridges. I know that probably 3 or 4 years ago we had a very, very comprehensive report on the status of all the bridges. I think they were ragged. The red ones hopefully have been dealt with because of the state of them. I know there were issues with then trying to get the contractors to site to complete the rest of them. Obviously, in that time period since that was done, costs have spiralled, inflation has spiralled and everything. So it's just really a question of where are we now with the BVR and the railway bridge maintenance? Have we sufficient? Because I'm not 100% sure that the reserve, etc., will be sufficient to cover all of that.
Thank you, Martin. And also, this goes back 6 years on ONS, Martin. I remember I raised an issue about budgets on the bridges and that being separated out 6 years ago. So it's been a kind of, and it's been progressing as the issues move forward on repairs. We do have a capital programme for that, and that will be focused in terms of the capital budgets moving forward for the new financial year. That will be covered. And it will be separated out, so that will be dealt with. Already we was actually going to do that, so the answer to the question here was already in the pipeline actually, so thanks for the question, and will be covered, Martin.
And then the final question for me at the moment was around question 18 and the Greater North Growth Board and the leisure facility for Rackheath. Obviously, I'm a member for the area, but it's just really looking at the progress towards putting the Rackheath Leisure Centre on the GT16 proposal towards the Greater North Growth Board.
I think I'm going to hand.
Yeah.
Do you want to do that?
No, you can if you know, because I've no more knowledge on paper.
It's because the Greater Norwich Growth Board is why I sort of thought I would take this on, because there's a rolling programme of things in the Greater Norwich Growth Board, and as I understand it, both Rackheath and Taverham are part of that. The Taverham one I think is further behind than the Rackheath one, but there are part of those SIL 5-year plan workings. They get updated every year, so I'd be quite honest with you, I'm not absolutely sure how far they are forward with either of those, so I don't know if there's an officer that would be able to help with that, but if not, I'm quite happy to take that back and check for you and make sure that that is where we're going with it. But I know, as I say, there is a rolling programme that takes account of those things.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's an important point that we deliver community, leisure and other facilities associated with those growth areas, Rackheath being an absolute key one. As the paper describes, there's multiple ways that you can fund those. In many cases, you'd want significant developer contributions. So we're going through the planning application at the moment, and that will be part of those negotiations. That can often be supplemented by other funding streams, whether it's Greater Norwich or whether it's local SIL contributions or whether it's other funding streams. And I think we're getting good as an authority about utilising those. Members have recently seen the proposals in Aylsham for the ongoing provision of facilities at Elsham High School. And that would be another way of looking at, do we co-connect, co-join the leisure facilities with the schools in the Rackheath development. All of those are still being progressed. We're not at a point where we can definitively say this is going to be delivery, this is the delivery timescale, this is where it's going to be, this is what it is. But absolutely the provision of those facilities is at the forefront, certainly of the planning team's mind. The only other point I'd make is clearly sometimes we can be beholden to a developer as to when they'll deliver, but we have the Community Infrastructure Fund where we can enable early delivery, especially working with local communities where they're getting a large still contribution. And so that will be part of those discussions going forward as well.
Appreciate that. It's just that I know that the developer is doing consultation within all of the parishes over the coming fortnight. And again, it's one of those for what is actually going to happen, and if it's not within the plan, if there's a possibility of fetching forward something that is going to be deliverable.
Just very quickly, absolutely. And again, that's why there was that Community Infrastructure Fund set up to enable early delivery when we knew there was a lot of still coming to a local area. All I'd be saying for local residents is try and be clear as they can as to what they would like to see in that area, not just for the existing community, but as the community grows in that area. And the greater the clarity, the more that we can work collectively to secure that.
Sue.
Yes, if I could just add, I think that's a key role that you play as well, isn't it, as district councillors? You facilitate those discussions, and obviously, you know the officer team will take those sorts of things forward, and I know they do. They will take on board the things that you come back with as well. So, that's a key thing to be giving to, isn't it?
I think Phil knows I'm not backward in coming forward.
Can I just ask, on item or question number 10 regarding disposal of Thorpe Lodge, just sort of clarification really, when it says officers on advice from the agent are making a pre-app submission which can be received, which when received can be circulated for potential purchases. Am I right in assuming that this means that we are looking at putting a pre-app on what housing or what properties could go on that site, so we could market the site as something which has, in theory, could take this many houses to try and make it more marketable in that way?
Yes, you're absolutely right, because one of the key things is it's a really difficult site, as you know. We have the listed building, which makes it quite difficult. There's also got the office block side to that, and not least the nuclear bunker, which is also raising some interest. The difficulty is that, trying to persuade people that that's a viable site for building on or for doing something with. So I think that's the purpose of the pre-app, is to lay out a potential design. It's not set in stone, but it might say you could have X number of apartments. You might choose to do them this way. How you might lay out that front block to make it stand out as a listed building. What benefits that would bring, and that might encourage people to do it. So I think that's the purpose of it, and I think actually it's what looks like it's coming forward is actually quite useful and positive. So I'm quite pleased to see what they're doing with it, because, as I say, it's a worry that we do need to be clear about how we market that, and that we do manage to dispose of it in a suitable way.
Have we, without wanting to labour, have we approached certain developers who have got a history of turning around similar sort of properties? I'm thinking, for example, in Drayton Old Lodge, I believe it's called, which is a similar listed structure, which was used as a mix of leisure, but also office premises there, which is now a thriving development in that everything seems to be sold more or less as soon as it's marketed. So they're the sort of people that we perhaps need to be approaching.
I'm confident that we've done pretty much everything we can, but just you want some more definitive, Debbie, I'm sure will be happy to give you some slightly more complex answers to that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's been on the market with Bidwells. We speak to Will there, who's marketing it for us. He's approached a number of different developers, doing a range of things, looking from hotels to offices, etc., also residential development. So there's been a wide variety of people who have looked at the site. As the leaders explained, we are looking at the pre-app advice, so to try and de-risk the site for bidders to come through. There seems to be more interest in it as a residential site, though, rather than an industrial or business sort of site. So the idea of the pre-app is, as I say, to de-risk it and hope, therefore, that we get better offers coming forwards if we are to go and ask for sort of final offers on a certain date, if that's the way we decide to go.
Thank you. Has anybody else got anything they'd like to ask? Fran?
Thank you, Jim. I've got a couple of questions as well. If I start, well, question 6 is around the Cabinet lobbying government for additional finance, ultimately. And I just wondered, it says here about the Managing Director actively involved with the District Council's network, etc. But it doesn't really say about any Cabinet members who are actively involved in the DCN or the LGA. And I just wondered how many meetings the Cabinet had attended on our behalf to lobby. Thank you.
Yeah, I can confirm that I've attended several virtual meetings, and I also took part in a summit which was looking at housing and the problems to do with lack of funding for provision for homelessness. There's also, actually, Natasha has rushed home from London today from a meeting that was held in Westminster to look at housing again for funding. I have written to the Secretary of State a number of times about various things, or more than one, in fact. So I think the Cabinet are actually pushing at every door possible. I think we are working with the LGA. East of England LGA has also been putting in, so I've been attended several of those meetings where similar concerns are being expressed. So I can, I feel confident that we're putting in all the effort that we can possibly put in, and if we're invited somewhere, I can assure you we turn up, whether they like it or not.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm pleased to hear that, but that wasn't in the answer. So it's good to have that sort of elaborated upon. No, that's okay. Okay. Obviously, well, just a question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, just wanted. Thank you. I just wanted to add to that, regarding Steve mentioning that I've just come back from London today. One of the things that came up from that housing summit was the offer of a round table with Michael Gove, of all people, regarding some funding. So I did put our name down to be on the table. So we are all collectively pushing. Thank you.
No, thank you. That's absolutely what I wanted to hear, really. So I'm really pleased to hear that. I just wondered where question 13 went. I don't know if anyone's got any clues there. But anyway, was it just bad luck not to have a question 13 tonight? I don't know.
Which was superseded by something else. It seems to
Was it?
Through it, and even when I got to see it, it was withdrawn. The third question
Okay.
to me because it was superseded by something else.
Okay. Fair enough. Also, as well, on question 14, obviously on housing, very, very important, and very important to me and this whole council, because obviously it's a massive financial impact, temporary accommodation. So I saw obviously the projections next year that our costs will go down by 200,000, which I'm really pleased about. Obviously, we've got the opportunity to buy further homes through the Local Authority Housing Fund. There is earmarked reserved for buying the temporary accommodation, and obviously there was some money left in that because we only bought 7 houses rather than 8 at Harvard Court. I just wondered what plans there were to use that money or top that up to buy more properties. So that's where I was really. I'm pleased to see that. Well, I say it was absolutely the idea of buying the properties was to make the temporary accommodation cost reduce, and I'm pleased that is actually being projected. But I just wondered where we were with the earmarked reserve, where it was, what the plans were for that. As I say, so if we've got any answers, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
I'm actually going to ask Rodney to cover this earmarked reserve because it predates us. So I think some clarity on that from Rodney would be really helpful. Or I know that as we're moving forward, we are applying for 2 more properties for temporary accommodation, Fran, because we all know that by providing more temporary, we are bringing down our revenue costs. And so the figure that's shown here will actually improve over the 200,000 during next year as we bring on those other 2 properties as well. But just in terms of that particular budget, which predates us, if I can just ask Rodney to cover that, please.
Thank you. Yes, you're absolutely correct. We did have the budget for purchasing the Harvard Court, and there is a sort of a suggested underspend on that because we haven't sort of used all that budget. It has in some ways been overtaken by the purchase of the additional LAF properties, which has been the priority to spend those. And indeed, as the portfolio said, there's some discussions going on to actually use and apply for more LAF money. So that at the moment is a priority, and I'm sure Cabinet will turn to the capital pot or reuse for that same purpose.
Thank you. And just one final question. It was around the question 19. We're looking at budgetary provision around recycling of soft plastics, which is obviously very, very important. And in many countries around the world, as we know, they recycle all their soft plastics. And here we don't recycle very much at all. So I just wondered, one, if there's been any further progress around this, about what we could do, but also as well, we've got a senior role here which hasn't been filled, and I don't know how long it hasn't been filled, but for some time. Obviously, looking at the budgets overall, if it's not been filled, I mean, the question I would have to ask is do we really need this role? Is it something we could really consider within the budget that could be removed? So that is my question, really. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I mean, those 2 points together, we want to boost our recycling, so clearly we were looking at recruitment of a senior recycling manager. But as in many areas we're finding these days, there's a small pool that we're drawing from, and so we have to be competitive and do our best to be able to recruit. But given that we are trying to improve our recycling rates, then clearly that post is important to us, and that's what we'll be looking at. In terms of actually, looking forward, clearly government have come out with their simpler recycling policy, which has moved certain targets further on, 25, 26. One of those is in relation to plastics as well, and so that, and at the moment there seems to be no clear policy in terms of how we're going to be able to deal with trying to think of the term that we use. Yeah, the plastics that we'll be required to recycle come 26, but it is 2026, and so that's something that we'll obviously be looking at in terms of with our other waste partners in the Norfolk Waste Partnership, and with the materials recycling facility as to how we're going to be able to improve that the recycling of those plastics. So it is something that we'll be looking at, and the MRF contract is coming up for renewal as well, so that'll be part of that negotiation going forward.
Just to add to that, Nick, I know that it was a direct question. I know that this was in the offing, but Rodney's just confirmed to me the post has actually just been filled.
I just want to come back on that. So what you're telling me is that you're waiting for the government directive, the government policy in 2026. You're not looking to do anything proactive now to actually deal with soft plastics. That's what I'm hearing from you. If you're telling me our policy is to do something different, that would be good to hear. But if we are really saying that as a council, we've called a climate emergency, etc., what are you actually going to do about this? Because this is a major issue.
Absolutely is. I'll transfer to Simon in a moment. But no, what I'm saying is the reason we're looking for a senior recycling manager and to fill those posts is so that we can boost the recycling. So it's not waiting on. What I'm saying is that the government could have been more clear in terms of what is going to be coming down the line for us to be able to work with. But actually that's been pushed on. So it's even more important for us to look at how we're going to improve our recycling, given that those targets have been moved on down to 2026, and we can't wait for 2026. A part of that, though, is understanding what that policy is going to be, so that we're not caught out in terms of, in a similar way to the food waste, if you like, where we're financing something that then the funding isn't coming through. But I'll transfer across to Simon.
but before you go to Simon, can I just ask you something there? So what you're telling me is that you'll only finance something, you'll only have policy for something which will improve the environment if the government pays for it. You're completely negating the idea that we actually do things for the right reasons. And that's what you're saying. I just do not understand where you're coming from. If we want to do something, we can put policies in place, as we did with recycling food waste. We did it for the right reason, not because the government was directing us to do so. So just please be clear. Thank you.
Sorry, you're misrepresenting what I'm saying there. I'm saying it's important for us to actually improve our recycling rates and that we should do all we can to do that. At the same time, we're cognizant of the fact that government have policies which they have pushed forward, pushed further away, and therefore it's even more important for us to be able to, improve ourselves without that government support, our recycling. But we also need to be cognizant of what is coming down the line in terms of what the requirements are going to be. And what we don't want to be, in a position is where, as you did in the previous administration, roll out a food waste recycling, food waste scheme, which we were hoping that new burdens funding would be coming through, but clearly isn't now because it's being pushed down the road by the government. So we haven't got that funding. We've got to cover that ourselves, which we're happy to do. But we have to be careful about what we do in terms of committing ourselves going forward to ensure that the funding is there. We do want to improve our recycling rates, and that's what we intend to do. But we have to be cognizant of the policies that are coming down the road. But I'll pass across to Simon.
It's got to be right, that's right. Yeah, thank you. Just to be clear, the government has made it a statutory requirement to collect plastic film on curbside collection, so effectively in the bin, from March 2027. It's not 2026, it's 2027. So we're working with the MRF at the moment because there is no technical ability to separate plastic film at the MRF at this moment in time. So even if we wanted to collect it now, unfortunately we couldn't actually separate it at the MRF. We've got a meeting on Thursday afternoon actually this week with the MRF to try and start the discussions to look at the technical ability, moving forward for them to be able to separate that at the MRF. It's the same across the whole of the country. While the government's made it policy, unfortunately there is no technology to separate the plastic film from the commingled recycling rubbish at the moment.
We have had discussions about this before, and there's been workshops here before about improving our environmental credentials, and it doesn't mean because it won't go in the recycling bin that we can't help recycle, because we can. I mean, we know that supermarkets collect soft plastics now, so why can't we work with supermarkets? Why can't we work with schools? Why can't we work with corner shops so they can, collect these things and we can help sort of improve? But it just feels as if, we're waiting for government policy. We shouldn't have to wait for government policy, as I said, about exactly with food waste. We didn't wait for government policy, we did the right thing. Thank you.
Sorry, you're misrepresenting again. We have to be cognizant of government policy, but we are moving forward and looking at the best way of recycling and working with partners. But I'll pass to Simon to explain that. Vice Chairman.
There we go. Got it right. Got it working now. Sorry. Yeah, you are quite right that obviously the supermarkets do collect plastic film at the moment, and those and et cetera, et cetera. And there was literally a meeting in this room last night of the Environmental Excellence Panel looking at how we can improve in advance of 2027, working with supermarkets, working with schools and those sorts of things around plastic film. The other interesting thing around, while it's talked about plastic film, it's actually soft plastic, as you called it, whereas, the first thing we've got to get out to the residents of the district is for them to understand what that means and what they can recycle. So I wouldn't say, it's wrong to say we're waiting for the government 2027. We're doing it now, but they've only just effectively told us that we've got to do it, and there is no technology, there's no market for the materials. I'd hate to tell you that the material that's collected by the supermarkets is burnt, it's not recycled. So there's a whole plethora of things that have got to be in place before 2027.
I'd just like to ask Jen, and then I'll go to Vice Chairman who'd like something to say, and then I'll wrap up this little particular point, and unless we've got any other questions relating to any other things. So I'll do Jen first.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate that we also, we are members of the Norfolk Waste Partnership, and within the partnership we've had discussions on how best we can work together in terms of collectively, because that provides consistent messaging in terms of recycling and so on. And I've certainly engaged with the portfolio holder for environment at County Council on what has been done in terms of recycling, what's possible. So for recycling paint, for example, working with partners like TerraCycle, where many communities already utilise that facility, and whether and how we can promote that. So there are a number of initiatives where we really are looking at the best way of improving our recycling, because as you say, Fran, we really do need to improve as much as we can, and that's what we will be doing, I can assure you.
Peter.
Thank you, Chairman. Question 16. I think members will be surprised to learn that I didn't raise that question, but I do have an interest in it. Two things. First of all, can somebody confirm to me when break-even actually is now scheduled for? I seem to remember some time ago the date I heard was 15 years hence from the opening of the site. Is that still the case? Looking at the income of 370,000 odd for next year, or 24-25, how does that represent close proximity to break even? What are the costs for that financial year? How far amiss is it from break even?
Yeah, it is 15 years before we're allowed, any money up until 15, for the first 15 years, it's not supposed to make a profit, it's supposed to cover its costs, which once all the units are done, as far as I'm aware, I will pass over to George just to confirm it, but that does cover the costs. After 15 years, we are allowed to, if you like, make a profit, but any of that money has to go back into the centre. It can't go anywhere else. These are under the terms of the European grant. That's what sets the rules. I did look into this before the meeting, and if you want it, I've got a couple of pages of the actual contract that was produced, and it lays it out that there's no profit is allowed to be made because it mustn't look as though there's state support. It's under the EU rules.
I understand that perfectly, but I still want to know. So 15 years down from the opening of the site to break even is still the target, is it? So basically it will be running at a loss till the 15 years are up, correct? And secondly, how much of that 377,000 is going to be going towards break even? Will it break even next year, or will it actually still be running at a cost?
It's not running at a cost now. It is paying for itself. It is at break even, as far as I'm actually aware. Andrew and Steve, you want to come in with finance?
Yeah, I mean, I can come on this, but I think also it's probably appropriate for George to come in first, so I think he'll probably cover it as well. But George, could you?
Yes, thank you. You'll be pleased to hear that the Food Innovation Centre is performing well ahead of the predicted turnover values and financial indices. In fact, there's no net cost to the authority at all for the Food Innovation Centre. As Councillor Booth describes, any additional income generated is to be retained by the centre to cover a number of costs associated with the building, but there is no draw on council funding at all. It's a self-contained business unit as we sit here today.
So it is actually cheaper, I think, already?
Yes.
I think they're proving what an absolute success the project is. Which may not have been what you intended, but no.
How could you doubt me?
It wouldn't be an ONS meeting if we didn't have mention of it from the Vice Chairman. Is there any different point on any different questions that we can seek clarification on? Because I think we've dug down into certain things quite a lot. Martin.
Sorry, I had a question, question 17, about the provisions for the mental well-being of the young people. I know that during and after COVID, and then from the Comp Fund, we had a large pot of money to help and assist with that and the effects. The effects of it have still not gone away. In fact, they're probably getting worse at the moment. And yet in the answer, it says that there are no specific allocated budget, and then it goes on in the final paragraph, in the future we've started a mental health programme. It's more a question of around what we're doing now.
Can you hear me now? Yes. We are actually working on it right now. I think this question, the answer looks a little bit out of date, but for several months now, we've been, through the Health and Wellbeing Partnership, we've been working on basically a young person's version of mindful towns and villages. So that's been in progress for a couple of months now. That will involve working with schools and other organisations. So it isn't a finished product, but that is something we're working on right now. But because of all the safeguarding issues, it's not something that we can whip together very quickly. It has to be done properly. So it is happening right now. Thank you.
That'd be quick, Jonathan.
Yeah, just one quick question. Question 11, does the budget make any provision for meeting future environmental challenges? I think that the answer could have easily been, yes, this is the figure for future environmental challenges, but what we've got there is, yes, we've done really well up to a point so far in history, but it doesn't actually say if there is any provision for future environmental challenges. And I would say that it does seem to me by that sort of statement that it's business as normal. There's, again, although a climate emergency has been declared, we're only doing what we were doing before. We're not upping the game.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the question. I think the what you're saying about not working on initiatives going forward is not quite true. Officers have spent quite a lot of time looking at, and as you'll recall this, looking at how we can improve the energy efficiency of our housing. And through a retrofit accelerator programme, which is building on the Warm Homes programme, which has been running for a while, to be able to really, at scale, develop a programme which can improve the energy efficiency of homes. But of course, that needs funding. So what we need to be able to do is have a programme which is well thought through and has a business case, as you've always insisted on, Councillor Emsall, which is, of course, an absolute requirement. But that needs working on to be able to develop a programme which is sustainable and which will be able to attract the funding required to be able to implement. So that's what officers are working on at the present time, to be able to have a programme which is sustainable, which has a proper business case, and where we can go out to attract the funding required to be able to do that. Now, there are various schemes that we can look at in terms of loans as well as grants, but it does take time to develop such a business case. So that's certainly a programme I'm very keen to be able to explore further. But of course, you know, we're in a funding climate where we need to be able to balance the budget and be able to attract that funding to be able to implement.
Yeah, I think that is true. I've always said that whatever we do needs to be have a sound case to do it, the business case to do it and everything. I will be very surprised if, unless there is a lot of money available from somewhere, that any retrofit business case actually adds up for the residents of Broadland. It would always look, in my eyes, always look like it would be a lot of money spent on a few residents, and that would, in my eyes, would be the business case wouldn't stack up if it was a little bit unfair.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we appreciate the challenges that are ahead, but that's something that we're looking at. A lot of it is around behaviour change and also encouraging those who are willing and are able to pay, you know, for those changes to take place, being in their mutual interest, you know, to be able to reduce carbon emissions and their energy costs as well. So that's part of a programme which links in with the Norfolk Climate Change Partnership and a programme that we're involved in now to be able to address those kind of behaviour issues that are, which, you know, which needs to, you know, behaviour change is a part of the challenge really, is to nudge people to be able to make those changes by themselves for those who are willing and able to pay. At the same time, there are those who are most vulnerable who we certainly do need to support in terms of energy efficiency of their homes and the cost of living crisis. So that's two aspects, if you like, of that programme that we're looking at. But let me pass over to the leader.
Yeah, I just was going to make the point that part of what we're doing with some of the funding that we've put aside for this is actually to get a programme that's proving we can do something. Because I think in the future there will be more funding available from government because there needs to be things done. There is a lot of housing, there's a lot of stuff out there still that we're not dealing with. And most councils actually don't have enough money to do that on their own. So our ambition really is to be taking part, where there's a possibility of taking part in something and setting something up, making sure we're in there on that, so that when something comes forward, we can go, yes, yes, we can do that. That's what we've put ourselves forward to do. So I think that's where we see we're putting extra funding in where we can to do those smaller scale things, which should help us then propel ourselves towards any extra funding that gets thrown out that we Broadland definitely wants and definitely deserves. So that's our ambition, I think.
I think we've had cool, you're pushing it, Martin. Is it a very quick point that we can come to? Because I think we've come to quite a lot. We've almost covered almost every question at this point. But go on very quickly.
It's only because you missed my hand the last time, because I wanted to come back on Natasha's answer, and thank you for the answer. And I'm really, really pleased that we are working on things at the moment. But it does beg the question that if we're working something on the present, but there is no specific allocated budget for next year. So my question would be, if we're doing something now, why isn't there a budget for next year?
It's coming through the Health and Wellbeing Partnership, which is a different funding pot.
Right. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the answers. I think we'll take this item as read. Perhaps it would be useful to have for ONS some further, given the level of questioning regarding some issues, some further feedback on the progress moving towards the recycling of soft plastics in the future and any changes in that, and perhaps when there is technology invented or a use is found for the plastic which would be collected, or an answer comes from the MRF about, MRF about how it will work, then we can have some, pardon? Yes, perhaps we could have a report to ONS regarding that. Thank you very much, all those to Cabinet members. You may wish to stay because I'm sure you're thrilled to hear the rest of what we'll be saying tonight. Thank you very much. There is no particular recommendation or anything to be taken, vote to be taken on that, but thank you, and thank officers who have contributed also to that. So we will move on from budget questions for Cabinet, item 5, to item 6, the Early Intervention Antisocial Behaviour Officer Pilot Service, review of progress. Lead Officer Nick Howard.
Chair, thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. Just a brief introduction, if I may. This report is a second progress report in year 2 of the Early Intervention and Social Behaviour Officer pilot. The previous report came through review and scrutiny in November 2022. So the purpose of this report is just to give you an update 12 months further on, or just beyond 12 months further on. Just very quickly, and as a refresh to outline the pilot, we are seeing in local authorities generally, but certainly here in Norfolk, a rising incidence of antisocial behaviour and nuisance complaints from residents. There appears to be a potential reduction in tolerance, but certainly a growth in the number of complaints that are received. Often complaints start with something very small and they escalate into something bigger. So the purpose of this pilot was to test the opportunities for a rapid intervention in appropriate cases where that early intervention prevents the need for anything further to take place. That doesn't necessarily mean that our criteria for an early intervention are set relatively low, not within normal life, but just beyond what would be normal life. And the calculation is that by getting involved at that stage, we prevent cases from escalating wherever possible. The antisocial behaviour policy adopted by the Council underpins the pilot service, and the pilot service aims to respond rapidly, nip problems in the bud, and to normalise as far as possible neighbour relationships and community tensions such as they might be, to stop those from escalating. You'll see in the report 5 success measures that we've been pursuing, and some with an eye on some longer term outcomes. The recommendation in the report is to receive and review the report and to provide feedback to officers where appropriate. But I wondered if it might be helpful just to give you 2 examples of what are we talking about, just to bring that to life. So example 1, first time complaint is received, one neighbour's complaining about loud music intermittently played from another address. It's not something the council's got any previous history on, or partner agencies have got previous history on, but it seems to be enough from the examples provided that an officer making a doorstep challenge to the person concerned can have a conversation to say, are you aware of this? These are the examples. What would be your reaction to that? So it's well before we would carry out a normal conventional investigation. Now, the behaviour of the person challenged might change, and that might be the end of the concerns raised, or it might not, and then we would go into our normal conventional practice of investigating. So that early intervention is before anything that traditionally a council would have done. Second example, first time complaint again, it might be about a barking dog, and when people are out, they don't know the dog's barking, and that's commonly a problem that we see, and dog owners will often say, I don't know what to do. When I'm not there, how do I control the dog? I need advice, I need help. And we, through an early intervention service, we can provide advice on dog control, dog training opportunities. In some instances, there's even been some brokering of a conversation between the person complaining and the person complained about. And in one case, the person complaining even said, well, I'll let your dog out for you if it just means I don't get any noise. Problem solved. And again, that early brokering is outside of what we would do in terms of the more serious investigations. Just finally, sometimes the purpose of early intervention is to see eyes on what the problems are, whether they are safeguarding problems, whether there's a vulnerability, whether there's a mental capacity issue, and is any supporting service needed. And there are instances where we've been able to refer cases into a triage service for some early support to be received. So again, 3 examples of where early intervention adds a bit of value that otherwise the service wouldn't be providing, but that comes at the cost of employing an early intervention and social behaviour officer to increase our capacity. Chair, I should probably stop there, but the report's fairly full. Hopefully it's self-explanatory. Here for any questions. Thank you.
Has anybody got anything they'd like to ask or say regarding this? Shane?
Yeah, just clarification really, that is the early, you said there was an increase in antisocial behaviour, but is the early intervention, how can I put this, are more people aware of it, or is there actually an increase?
Yeah, perfectly fair question. There is a rise in the number of cases being reported. It's not a response to the early intervention service being offered. So people are often surprised, and anecdotally what they say is, I rang you, but I'm really surprised that somebody actually called me, and I'm particularly surprised that someone turned up to do something about it. So it's an early response, but it's not driving an enhanced volume of case demand. We're seeing a case demand increasing, and so are other local authorities.
Eleanor.
Thank you. Yeah, I see the pilot ends quite soon, actually, doesn't it? The funding for the pilot in March. Are you fairly confident that we've got options for funding the service in the future? And also, I think we started with 2 officers on this pilot and we're down to 1. So are we looking at continuing with 1 or aiming for 2 in the future?
Thank you. So the aim here was to pilot a service. I'll be frank with you, there isn't currently funding identified to continue the service into the future. And so as it stands, when that service comes to an end, we are having conversations with housing associations. Naturally, housing association, social landlords, as in other tenures, have their share of complaints about tenants and they're a landlord for the property. So there are conversations following on from the time and task panel with housing associations about how do we work together going forward. If there is no opportunity there, then we will be absorbing the learning within our community protection team so that we can provide early intervention as far as possible within the resources that the council has. There were 2 officers funded in year 1. The service continued in year 2 with the benefit of external funding, but that funding could only be found for 1 post. There was only 1 officer in post because of a person who moved on, and it has continued. So we've been able to test it with 1 versus 2 officers, but that's how the future looks at the moment. Thank you, Jim. Thanks for the report. I mean, obviously this is a real issue for many, many people. It's a live issue day to day. I just wondered though, obviously this has taken pressure off of some of the officers within the team, and that's a really good thing. With the new regulator and regulations coming in from for social housing providers in April, how much work will they need to take on, and will that take pressure off of us, or could it be that we've had, there's still time to have those discussions about if it would help them that we could provide the service on their behalf? So I'm saying so we could continue with the service, but being funded by them on behalf of the social housing providers. I just wondered if any of those conversations had taken place. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So clearly there are responsibilities from housing associations and from the council, as with the police. So we all have responsibilities for tackling antisocial behaviour, statutory responsibilities. Absolutely, the conversations with our housing association colleagues, as the new regulations and standards come into place, will firmly be on how together can we go forward in the future and provide the best degree of antisocial behaviour response and community safety support to our wide range of residents. It may be that some of the housing associations would wish to take up the early intervention service or part of the wider and social behaviour service from the council. It may be that some would prefer to do it themselves, and there are variations in responses and approaches from individual housing associations. The big 3-4 housing associations present in Broadland are the ones that we're having the greatest degree of conversations with. Those conversations are ongoing, so there is scope to identify whether or not there's a desire to fund from 1 or more housing associations. We don't have the answer to that yet.
I always love a map, but I wonder, it would be very interesting, perhaps just be interesting, but perhaps not useful, I don't know. But the heat map is a very good way of looking at something, but it would be interesting to know how that has changed and developed, because obviously you look at some of the hotspots. I look at a hotspot in my own ward, and also not far from where I live. That's nothing to do with me, can I just say? Yes. But be interested to know whether it's something which is a consistent problem in some areas, or whether it's a particular instant that set something off. I think back to years ago when I was councillor for Tavern, and we had a report from, for example, the police at a parish council meeting regarding, I think, 7 or 8 crimes within Tavern. We thought, oh my God, that's really high. they were all at one event, at one wedding, at one place on one night. And other than that, there'd been zero crime in Tavern, but it looked like it was an absolute hive of theft and assaults. And that was, so I know that these can be very much a one-off event that causes or a one-off set of circumstances. So it'd just be quite interesting to see that map, 6 months, 6 months, laid out. So I wonder if that's something, if you come back and report in future, might be able to do, because then it would give us an indication of whether there's a consistent problem in an area or whether it's just that cyclical thing. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yeah, we were really excited to be able to see the heat map as well. Probably more excited than we should be, but we're the professional team that would get excited about such things. The distribution, generally speaking, reflects our urban distribution. And currently, if there are service requests that come in repeatedly, if we carry an investigation, we close it, and there's a complaint later, that would appear as 2 dots on the map. We try to combine things where there's a number of complaints about one address, rather than it suddenly appear like there's a big problem. We are trialling some functionality for data insight using Power BI at the moment in a short-term project, and that's where the heat map comes from. But in future, if the technology continues to be available to us, and we certainly hope so, we will be able to track over time whether there's a change in distribution. And indeed, this could apply to pollution complaints or other types of complaints, where we're able to run the slider across the dates and see where the patterns change. So this is the first time we've got the opportunity of the heat map. Very happy to report back in the future and share any insights that we find from it.
Actually, I think it may have been you who talked about similar for fly tipping. Is that me having a conversation with you at one of our things? Yeah, because that would be interesting also to see whether that, because I said that, you know, once you've got that technology, you start thinking it can be used for reacting and not just being reactive, you know, proactive in dealing with things across wide areas, because you know there's going to be a particular problem there. Thank you. Has anybody else? Jonathan?
Yeah, is this data available to us now? Because I'm obviously with the map and everything like that, you can see hotspots, but are us as local councillors, would we then be informed that there was a, you know, I don't know if that's the high school or if it's just the Dussendale estate in general, which is that hotspot in Thorpe St Andrew, but that information coming through to me to say there seems to be a bit of a, you know, a spike, and that could well be that it's something, you know, some area in the town that we could then look at, you know, simple things like siting more CCTV cameras or something like that, just to sort of say, look, there's a massive spike there. And obviously if it was that was, you know, where we could site a couple of CCTV cameras and that would then change that would be a plus for everybody.
The data in the heat map runs from October 22 to August 23. So it is aggregated over a period of time. If it was a pile of dots all against one property, it would appear as a pile of dots. So typically what this is showing is the distribution in suburbs, market towns and built up areas. So it's across residential areas rather than small peak events. And indeed we now run a daily triage meeting with our police and other partner colleagues. So if we picked up a sudden block of complaints coming in, then we would refer those into the daily triage meeting. There is an opportunity to look at shorter time periods. We have to be very careful, because once you get to very short time periods, you can individually identify properties on the map, and from a GDPR point of view, we have to be very careful about that. But if we found a significant ward issue, then under our existing protocols, we would want to bring that to a ward member's attention in any case. So to reassure you, this refers to a general spread of where antisocial behaviour and nuisance complaints would come from based on built-up areas.
Thank you. Tony?
Nick, can I just ask, has the Office of Police and Crime Commission, have they definitely confirmed that they're not prepared to support it anymore, or have they been kept informed as to the success of the project?
Yes, we're in regular touch with the officer at the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, so we've got a good understanding with them. We recognised at the outset that the offer was for 12 months funding, and we have received confirmation that they won't be able to fund going forwards. So it was a one-year opportunity to take this pilot through a second year and see what that revealed, and you can see a body of information in the report in front of you.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Peter, isn't it?
Thank you. Has there been any work done with the educational authorities? Because we're talking about antisocial behaviour and possibly an opportunity to try and nip some of this antisocial behaviour like graffiti and vandalism in some of the larger towns like Sproat and Thorpe St Andrew. It just seems a concern to me that are we doing anything to try and nip the problem in the bud? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So this report refers to the intervention and challenge side of antisocial behaviour and nuisance control, which would extend, if necessary, into enforcement being carried out. What it doesn't do is to cover the wider diversification of activities and facilities for young people and the prevention aims, which tend to sit with Mike Pursehouse and the individuals and families sub-directorate. So there are wider services that are at play there, and I wouldn't want to speak for them because I won't get the answers right for you, and Mike Pursehouse definitely can do, I'm sure of that. That just to say, however, that we are working on antisocial behaviour as a key priority theme as part of the county-wide community safety partnership, which has got a very wide range of players, including the county council. So there's a good range of connections to ensure that we do the very best we can, and indeed with the Office and Police and Crime Commissioner. So we're looking at a range of projects, not least through the Safer Streets Fund 5 funding, which the Home Office is rolling out at the moment. So there's a wide range of programmes to minimise and prevent as well as to tackle. This is more about the tackling.
Jonathan.
Yeah, we've obviously from this pilot, what we'll call the rapid response, the actual someone making a complaint and then someone appearing on the doorstep. That obviously has proved very successful, and people are very pleased to be listened to, I guess. Is there any way that if this did stop, that we would have the opportunity to make normal everyday work have more of a response, or is that going to then prove impossible without the extra person to actually go out and do it? Or would it be possible to change the normal day service to increase the rapid response side of it?
One of the benefits, it might just help to say this, one of the benefits of having the early intervention and social behaviour service has been to lift a little bit of pressure off a significant amount of complaint volume, which can be quickly nipped in the bud. What that means is that the senior officers dealing with longer investigations and enforcement matters have got a bit more time to put into those. At the end of the pilot, we won't have early intervention and social behaviour officers, but we have been reviewing the structure within the community protection team so that we can absorb that learning, and alongside what we referred to earlier in terms of working with housing associations and who investigates first complaints against housing association tenants, that set of arrangements is being explored to make sure that the capacity works as very best it can and maintains some of the nipping it in the bud philosophy. So I hope that wasn't a waffly answer, just to say provisions are in hand to do the best we can.
Also stress that I believe that this must save actually the police a large amount of time. If you're nipping in the bud antisocial behaviour issues, you're also stopping these things escalating into neighbour disputes, damage to property, assaults and various other things, which must save the police an enormous amount of time. Yes, do you think the Police and Crime Commissioner is aware, are his offices rather than officers aware, do you think, of the benefit this is allowing him in being able to appropriately deploy police as quickly as possible to incidents?
Yeah, I'm absolutely certain of that, and through the regular strategic and tactical conversations we have with police and colleagues, all the way down through to the daily triage meetings that we are having, we can see that partnering approach is working really well. The local authorities made a significant investment in tackling antisocial behaviour in the way that we are, and I think we're seeing the results of that. It doesn't mean that the problem's gone away, but it means that we have a partnership approach to dealing with it where we make sure the right agency has the first response. So I know that's recognised, and I know that our partnering that's been growing has partly been growing as a result of it.
Thank you. I'd like to move to the recommendation to receive and review the early intervention anti-social behaviour officer pilot service progress to date and provide feedback as appropriate. We believe we've fed back, but I'd like to the recommendation.
And that's
It's unanimous, Chairman, I think.
Thank you ever so much, Nick, for that report. Thank you. We move to item 7, the Business Regulatory Support Hub Pilot Service Review of Progress, and that we have Lee Chan. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Chair. This evening, just going to give a bit of an overview. It's the second update for the Business Regulatory Support Hub Pilot Service. The previous update was in November 2022. It was at a time where we were at a crossroads. The initial funding was for a 12-month pilot period, and the officer that we had as a coordinator role had just secured alternative employment within the council, so we retained those skills, but unfortunately it left us with a little bit of a gap. So there's a hiatus in the delivery of this pilot project, so it's coming forward now at the most opportune time to give you the most detailed overview of where we're at this moment. So I think the data's there to just provide you with an update at this moment in time. So we secured, thankfully, some UK shared prosperity funding, and that then allowed us to go out to recruitment and secure another coordinator in post and then move it on again through 2023. So this is mainly the report updating from that stage. Early report from November covered the first phase with the first coordinator, and a lot of the groundwork was already done. We'd sort of set up awareness of the hub, we'd generated marketing material, we'd generated website, local rate phone number, social media presence, and we were just building on that role and all the early learning from that initial appointment. So the idea being that for the pilot and the hub role, we could see that there was a need. We've got lots of competent officers across the authorities that all have lots of information that they can share with business, but we needed a hub approach to bring it all together, to package it nicely, rather than maybe having officers go into great detail in their own specific service areas. We need someone that can hopefully cover enough information for a new start business to get them up and running as quickly as possible and give them the best chance of early success and then continued longevity of that business. So the idea of the hub is to try and bridge that gap, save somebody that hard-earned learning and shortcut them to that information that they really need at the outset. And that might be a new business, it might be a business looking to expand, it might be a business that's looking to relocate to the area. So it covers many strands of business where we're supporting strategic aim of growing our economy. And notwithstanding the need to ensure that those businesses sit fairly and squarely on a good legal footing, they are aware of their statutory obligations, as well as the opportunities that a local authority could provide to those businesses at the right time. So the information is there in the report. There's a lot of data that's being gathered. The service measures outline a number of steps under section 3.2 on bottom of page 32, and pleasing to say that the appendices, you'll see a lot of data-rich information there on engagement data, customer feedback, comparators for, say, the food hygiene rating scheme. They're all showing a good, strong upward trend, and even the information that's hot off the press come this January at this moment in time, for the latest incarnation, it's gone up from, I think, I look back at Appendix 3, we were at 133 businesses engaged, and now, in just a couple of months later, we're at 192 businesses engaged. So it's all the while building a groundswell of information, what it can achieve. Initially, we were drawing upon good information sources, for example, new food businesses registrations. It's a legal obligation to do, but we were using the hub to get in there really early with a very early contact to try and give the information to help those businesses succeed and be ready for that first inspection. So when they get that initial inspection, they stand a really good chance, if they've taken advice, taken it on board, to get a good 5 rating, food hygiene rating, very good, or a 4 rating, good, which is where we're looking at for our corporate service measures, and it's one of the things that we report on to the council. So we're just working the right way to get those businesses where they need to be, early doors. So the information is in the report that covers many strands of where we are at this moment in time. As I said, the feedback that we've had has been absolutely excellent. As a senior service manager, I've had no adverse feedback at all during the entire pilot project, which I think speaks volumes of how it's landed. And we're doing a lot of feedback into those businesses. So where we've gone to those businesses, given them advice, we're going back 6 months down the line, a few months down the line, and saying, you know, that advice that we gave you, did that hit the right spot? Is there anything now that you've learned since that you would have liked to have known when we had that initial conversation? And we're building that in all the while to improve the information that we then provide to future inquiries. So I think it's a really strong building of information to help businesses. It crosses over in the regulatory area, it crosses over into economic development and covers both camps really, really well and strongly to help with the local economy and, as I say, compliance, which then helps our regulatory services in what they find they're spending less time having to educate businesses of what they should be doing because they're already doing it, because they've had the opportunity of that advice. So I think we're just looking at it from a business person's point of view, more so than a regulator or a council saying what we can do, what we can offer, what do they need? And that's really where we're sort of the approach that we're taking with a ask me anything approach, one-stop shop, and then we're all the while learning. So I think that's probably where I'd like to leave it, and probably ask for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Shane.
Thank you. Yes. When I first started reading through this report, excellent report, by the way, the more I read through it, the more it made sense, and the more the benefits of it became clear. I noticed, however, at 1.4, it says that the funding is a fixed-term contract and up to the 31st of May 2024. So can I ask, are there intentions to continue this, and if so, through what funding?
The cutting to the point in question very succinctly, at this moment in time, we've explored opportunities for funding, but at the moment there is no obvious funding stream that can replace this. Obviously, we've got a lot of learning from this pilot project, and we would look to bake some of that back into how we deliver our frontline services. But in terms of a hub coordinator post, as well as the way that the current hub coordinator post spends 2 days at Carrabrek as well, there are things that we obviously need to work forward and see how we can still offer services to a degree and take on that learning to not be too much of a detriment, but there's no obvious funding at this moment in time.
Adrian.
Yeah, just picking up on the feedback here, I think looking at some of this, you know, it's personally directed to the officer that's involved and their professionalism, so passing regards of that great feedback, because sometimes the person doing the role makes a big difference to the businesses, and I think that's picked up in that feedback. So, what I say.
Eleanor.
It's certainly something that the project and the way it's delivered is very strongly allied to the business acumen side of our current hub coordinator. And in conversations around the council, I'm at pains to say this is somebody that we wouldn't want to lose from the authority. So if there were similar project work or roles that would be suitable as a transferable skill set, it's a person that comes across very well and works very well with businesses. So would be encouraged to try and retain that skill.
Yes, thank you. In terms of finance, what sort of funding would we be talking about per year to keep running this project? And also, if government funding is not available, would there be potentially funding from the business community itself?
Some projections have been done in terms of future costings. As you appreciate, it's very officer person
derive the costs. There's not a great deal of costs in addition to that. It's very much linked to the hub coordinator post. We've got funding for 2 months in the next financial year, but if you were to then continue, we'll be looking at in the region of just less than £32,000, of which on a 45-55 split, it was just over 14k funding for Broadland, and just 17.5k for South Norfolk on that split basis. Obviously, that is not as part of a growth item, and we appreciate we're in a situation where many councils are looking at their finances very carefully, and it's not in our current salary commitment for next financial year.
Thank you for that reply. I just wondered whether this has been explored with the business community in Broadland, whether there's options going down that route rather than looking at grants, say, that come from the government.
I think the advantage that businesses perceive is it covers a lot of ground very quickly, and it maybe does have a commercial value, but probably not to the extent where we could have a prediction to cover that as a full-time officer post. So I think if you are reliant on it being fully funded from commercial cost recovery basis, we would be more likely to lose that person to looking for other opportunities than retain that person, because we wouldn't be able to fully cost recover that role at this moment in time. It takes a while to build into that recovery and to then market it and then to get the money back. So I think we would have to, any continuation would be at risk and not on budget.
Emma.
Just because they would change the room, they don't like it. I had to get that in again. Just in terms of staff and cost, the cost that Lee refers to as a salary cost, don't forget obviously there's on costs with that, which are about circa 30%, and then obviously there's the wraparound, the RAN cost as well, so it's probably closer to about 50k, obviously still the 45-55 split, but there will be those on costs as well.
Steve.
Me the liberty, I'm not known as a member of asking a question on this, then I'll comment about the issue about the staff job post rather. On the appendix 3, you've got the breakdown there of the business engagement, 61%, 39, running from February to September, and then June through to November, again 60-40, and the graph below that with each month. So the engagement of 60-40, what's the reasoning behind that? What's the basis for that? Is that just on our cost basis in terms of sharing the costs, or is it just because this is the way that businesses are actually coming through to us? Could you just cover that for us, and I'll come back to it.
This is purely a numerical breakdown of the number of businesses engaged on a one-to-one bespoke advice basis. So that equates to 133 businesses in the latest appointment of coordinator, of which 40 of those contacts were centred in Broadland district and 60% were centred in South Norfolk district. So it's not based on a cost of how long maybe that engagement was in terms of officer time. It's a numerical split.
Okay, so the question is why? Is that because we've got less new businesses starting up in Broadland, or is it a contact issue?
We've taken an approach where we've provided the same information to both Broadland and South Norfolk councils. Social media, marketing, everything has been mirrored, and we've got a non-denominational local rate number, so it doesn't centre on a Norwich dial code, it doesn't centre on a South Norfolk Long Stratton dial code. So it's, again, it's just how businesses have engaged, And whilst we split officer costs at 45, 55, it's not too far away from that. So I think it probably bears out that split, and it's even closer when we look at the current split of June to what is now January, as of today's figures. It then equates to 43% Broadland and 57% South Norfolk. So 43% compared to 45, 55, we're very close. So it's consistent, I would say.
Last thing is, in relation to, and thanks Emma for just coming back on the total costs, employment costs, which of course you have to do. So you reckon that's around about close to 50. So if we had a 40-60 split, then we're talking about 20k for Broadland roughly. Sorry, I'll keep.
You would be the 45-55 split, Steve. It wouldn't be any different. So all staffing costs, unless it's something like CNC, which is purely run by South Norfolk, all staffing costs are based on the 45-55 model. There's no differential to that.
Yes. On our 45 split on the 50, roughly. Yeah. Okay. Okay. What we'll do, Nick, is this is on the hoof, so we shouldn't do things on the hoof, but we're right in the middle of the budget right now. However, this is a pretty important thing. I think the ONS has actually flagged up in comments that have been made around the table. For that sum of money, I think what we'll commit to here is that we'll have a look at this over the next week or so. Can't promise anything, but we'll have a look at it at least to see what we can do. And of course, South Norfolk would need to come to that party as well, Emma as well. But perhaps we could give a lead on it if they come to that party. But we'll have a look with Rodney, see what we can do around it. Can't promise at the moment, but we'll have a look at least.
Martin.
Hopefully just a very quick one. I noticed in the later appendices, in Appendix 3, it's predominantly around food businesses which are taking up on this. And it's great because that sector is suffering at the moment. But is there a wider appeal for this to try to get it out to more of the other businesses?
Thank you for the question. Initially, we were using our intelligence that we were receiving about food businesses, so that was coming to us. So we wanted to get in there early from a regulatory statutory role to get those businesses that are a start-up in the right place, and so they understood their legal obligations and could make food safe for the consumers of the districts and wherever they go beyond, if they're suppliers. Then what we're seeing is we've reached a tipping point in the autumn time where more than 50% of our inquiries are non-food. So, and that's the incoming inquiries. So it's coming back to the marketing, and we're doing quite a bit of work with our comms and marketing team to keep refreshed. We're trying different approaches. We put video out on YouTube, and we've got that embedded in there as well. And we're appealing to a much more wider range. So if you were to look at the reach demographic on the types of businesses in Appendix 3, the range of the other 50% at that moment in time was quite diverse, and it's shifting all the while. So maybe start of it was maybe 75% food businesses, now it's 50%, and it's all the while going down because we're getting more non-food businesses. We're not dealing with any less food businesses. We still get the same rough kind of number of new registrations over the course of a year, but it's the number of non-food businesses that are changing that split.
Can I just say at this point, given that we have had a lot of people very supportive of what has been said, and a lot of nods, and not necessarily lots of questions, which is usually a good sign, I would say, that we could make a recommendation to officers that actually, given what Steve had said, and we can't recommend to Cabinet, but we can recommend to officers that they investigate how we could go ahead with maintaining this position in the future. And if people are agreeable with that, we can find the appropriate wording. Did I say something which sounded appropriate?
That sounded
Okay.
I'll put it in the form of words for you.
Okay.
The committee would like to see.
So perhaps we can add that to when we make the recommendation, but I think for, right, okay, well, we'll ask James to clarify that it can go to whoever and be passed on to whoever, because not wanting to cut across anybody who might have anything else to say, but it seems to me that the way you have spoken with such enthusiasm and I won't say quickly, but what you're doing, because you're not, because it sounds like wrong here, but when I'm really enthusiastic for something, I don't almost have to sort of stop or think or chop or change about what I'm saying, and I have a clarity of speech which doesn't always come across here. But usually when I'm talking about maths, funny enough, at school, I'm very good and very clear. Your enthusiasm and passion for this has come across, I think, certainly to me, and I think, you know, the benefit of this just seems to massively outweigh the investment that we're making into it, because you know, just you've highlighted so many things, and we've looked through this report. So Emma, how would you like us to word it?
So I'm typing furiously trying to get this together. I note Steve's point, but I think what we wouldn't want to do is say we're going to send a report to Cabinet if we can't find funding. So I think it needs to be overview and scrutiny to recommend to officers to review funding opportunities for this post alongside South Norfolk, and then to take a report through to Cabinet should we be able to secure such funding, because if we can't, then there's not a report to take forward to Cabinet. Because I think we need to recognise that we do need to talk this through with South Norfolk as well.
Absolutely, and just clarifying on that, there's two ways to go about it. This next week, actually, we can look at this in terms of a provisional revenue situation because we're setting the budget for February, or we can wait and then come back with an officer paper to us with, you know, how this actually benefits financially these businesses, etc., which would be post the budget setting in February. So there's the two different ways we could go about it. Of course, once you get past the budget, it's more difficult.
Right, are we happy to go ahead with the voting on the recommendations stated within the papers and also the proposal that Emma just read out? We'll take them both together. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chairman, I think.
Thank you so much, Lee. Really good. All I was going to just actually add was the food hygiene rating is, I mean, it's a no-no for so many people. They turn up somewhere and see anything less than a 4 and go, you know, and that could just be the death knell for a business. And the fact that you're helping preserve businesses by helping them improve that, even just as that's the most obvious thing that in many ways people will notice on our high street, you know, a change in that rating. But that's just one example of so much good this is doing, so thank you. We move on to item number 8, the work programme, and Sinead can report from, you've got the report from here.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. So just to provide an update on the work programme. So we've had a number of new items added to the programme since the last meeting with the agreement of the Chair. So just draw your attention to these new items. So on the 26th of March, we now have an item on the Broadland Food Innovation Centre, and that's as a result of a topic form that was submitted. Also on the 26th of March, we have the cost of living report. That was originally on the agenda for today, but due to some delays on some information the report author is waiting for, that report will come to the March meeting instead. We've also added to the programme in August a meeting with the PCC, so that will be the newly elected PCC, and that will be a chance for the PCC to talk to ONS around their proposals for their community safety and crime plan for Norfolk, so that will be a good opportunity for ONS to have a review of that. And then in September, we've also agreed a date with officers to have a review of the Horizon Centre project. So that will be on the agenda in September.
We don't have to vote on that, but we hope all those are noted and people are happy that we're sort of expanding the scope of ONS to look at things beyond what was normally on there, and hopefully also made the Vice Chairman very happy that there'll be further conversation about food innovation. Static. If nothing else, let's close the meeting, noting that Vice Chairman is ecstatic.